Does the will of the Taiwanese people not count?
I see Taiwan as part of China, period. But what you're suggesting is a way condoning an attempt to break up a legitimate independent country. And I don't accept that.
China has said that if peaceful reunification doesn't work, they reserve the right to use force. If it comes to that, would you condemn that? So you would use force?
Yes.
But you say the Chinese threat is Western phobia.
What are you suggesting? I mean, this is, to me...
I'm not suggesting anything, I'm just asking questions.
This is a masterclass in how to turn an interview into a Cold War audition. This Al Jazeera reporter sits down with Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim and keeps asking variations of the same question. Why are you not more terrified of China? Why aren't you tough on China? Anwar's answer is refreshingly grown up. Southeast Asia has disputes, talks, trade, diplomacy, and a very strong interest in not turning every fishing boat and aircraft incident into World War III. Today, the China threat script gets a reality check. The original interview is linked below. Let's go.
But coming back to our broader theme of the challenges of middle powers, of the global south holding big powers to account, in this region, China is the big power. But it appears to have divided Southeast Asian countries because each of you have individual deep trade ties with China. So you have a situation, sir, where some of your neighbors are saying they're fighting rising Chinese territorial aggression. But you say the Chinese threat is Western phobia. It's not a serious threat.
Well, it is Western phobia because if you talk to the West, the only issue they raise is South China Sea and they perceived Chinese aggression. I say from my experience, not only Malaysia but also in ASEAN, the engagement continues. In fact, we have called for the inclusion of the Code of Conduct, which was not initially agreed upon, but now the Chinese have considered.
But you say Western phobia. Your own foreign ministry described Chinese aggression as a serious threat to Malaysia's sovereignty after China sent fighter jets over your waters in 2021.
Yes. That's all that we say. That's what happened.
But that doesn't sound like Western phobia. That sounds
no
that's
Western
your own
phobia
government.
Because they have been harping on this on a daily basis and in every meeting. And I'm saying, other than that, once we did object or protest, they stopped.
Malaysia did protest the 2021 flight involving 16 PLA aircraft. I mean, it was a serious incident, and Kuala Lumpur objected. That's a sovereign state acting like a sovereign state. But this reporter's little trick is taking one disputed incident and inflating it into a permanent regional apocalypse. Malaysia didn't declare war. It didn't sever ties. It lodged this protest and kept engaging because adults can defend their interests without letting Washington write the entire script for them. The 2021 event was contested, even on the basic airspace question. Malaysia called it a breach, while China said the aircraft hadn't entered another country's sovereign airspace. That doesn't erase Malaysia's concern. It means the situation required diplomacy, not this shit-stirring China is about to conquer ASEAN routine.
So you're saying that you found it as a one-off, but your own neighbors don't seem to agree. The Philippines defense minister said in May this year that China's expansionism is unabated. We are in for a long-time struggle.
Well, I agree in the sense that Philippines is an exception because they continue to have issues, but they raise, and always there is an engagement. This is not, you're not talking about Gaza or Ukraine. This is continued negotiations and engagement between these countries. The Philippines, because the claims, it's more contentious, yes, the area in question. And we have always called consistently for negotiations to take place. But it doesn't happen as is promoted by the Western media, I hope, not Al Jazeera.
This dude keeps asking, but what about the Philippines? Yeah, the Philippines, they have disputes with China. Nobody needs to pretend otherwise, and it's well documented. The question is, what is ASEAN actually doing about it? ASEAN and China issued their South China Sea Declaration back in 2002, agreed implementation guidelines in 2011, and began formal Code of Conduct negotiations in 2018. Those talks are slow because diplomacy sometimes can be slow. It's not a Marvel film. Nobody gets a dramatic soundtrack every time a negotiator opens a folder. But the goal is clear: peaceful settlement, rules of conduct, confidence building, search and rescue, maritime safety, and keeping a regional dispute from becoming somebody else's proxy war. China is at the negotiating table. ASEAN is at the negotiating table. That is part of the story. This reporter keeps stepping over because people are talking doesn't sell as well as China terrorizes everyone.
But
No, I'm only citing your own. I'm not. These are not Western
but it's out of
sources.
context.
These are our own neighbors.
No, we have problems with all our neighbors. We have with Thailand. Why is it not an issue? We have problems, contentious claim with Singapore, with Brunei, with a maritime country.
Of course, you're right. All neighbors have differences. The difference with China is that China is the only one that literally claims all of the South China Sea as part of its territory.
But they're negotiating.
I know, but I'm saying it's that claim which sets it up as a basis for a lot
But
of
there's no
conflict.
aggression thus far.
Why is it then, sir, that it's not just the Philippines, it's Vietnam, it's Japan,
Yes,
it's
yes.
even Australia, it's India in another geography.
Even Malaysia, we do have issues. We engage. My point is no aggression, is no show of force or military or perceived attacks. So once a note was sent, they took off the seat, as long as it's not a withdrawal of their claim.
Anwar nails it. Why does every disagreement in Asia have to be packaged as China bad, everybody else is helpless? The South China Sea has overlapping claims and serious legal and security disputes. Fine, I'm not going to get into that today. But this reporter treats the whole region like it has no agency, as if ASEAN governments can't negotiate trade, protest, cooperate, or set their own priorities without an Indian journalist assigning them a fair response. Meanwhile, China-ASEAN goods trade hit a record $1.055 trillion in 2025, up 7.4% year-on-year. That was larger than China's trade with either the EU or the United States. That's not evidence that ASEAN has been captured. It's evidence that Southeast Asia understands a basic fact the geopolitical commentariat hates. China is next door. China is economically central, and stable engagement beats endless confrontation.
Okay.
So why do you make it as if it is a real aggressive and contentious and...
No, I'm not making it. I'm just citing your own foreign ministry.
Yeah, but
can I ask you this? That some would argue that Prime Minister Ibrahim is being somewhat soft on China because they're your largest trading partner.
I'm soft with all my neighbors, with China, with the United States. What do you do with Gaza? But at the same time, you do express views, either privately or publicly, on these issues. Like the South China Sea, we expressed. We were very...
So trade is not a factor. It's not because of the high volume of trade between you and China
No, we
that you
have high
downplay
volume
the
of-
Chinese threat.
We have high volume, highest with the United States. Number one is United States. Number two is Germany. Number three is China.
So there it is. The implication is that Malaysia trades with China because it's scared, compromised, or bought. That's the colonial mindset in a nice blazer. If a global South country works with China, it must be a victim. If it works with the West, apparently that's a strategic partnership. ASEAN-China trade is not some dirty secret. It's over $1 trillion a year. China has been ASEAN's biggest trading partner since 2009, while ASEAN has been China's biggest trading partner since 2019. That is mutual dependence, supply chains, jobs, markets, and two sides deciding they would rather build than bomb each other. And I wouldn't say ASEAN is ditching the West. Malaysia's own 2025 trade report highlights record exports to ASEAN, the United States, Taiwan, and the EU. The grown-up global South position is not pick a master. It is trade with everybody and let nobody own the region. Now, the Indian journalist acts like that is suspicious because the script only has 2 buttons: submit to the West or be a Chinese puppet. This is pure bullshit.
Would you say, though, coming back to my point about ASEAN, the idea of a group of small middle powers acting as a counterweight to China, that you see these divisions, you have a different view, your neighbors have
Why
a different view.
counterweight
Would you
against
say,
China?
let me finish the question.
Why not counterweight against America or India?
I'm asking only about the region at the moment. Would you say in that regard that ASEAN has been a failure? It's not been able to act as a successful counterweight.
It's not ideal. It has secured peace. It has not reached serious war. There was some skirmishes between Thailand and Cambodia being contained. It is an exception in any sub-regional groupings.
Right.
And it continues to function, and the engagement has been vibrant. I mean, a year, I presided with ASEAN last year, hundreds of meetings, ministers, heads of governments, officers, and we work together every single field.
Calling ASEAN a failure because it refuses to become an anti-China military bloc is exactly the problem. ASEAN was founded to keep Southeast Asia stable after decades of colonialism, wars, coups, and great power interference. Its entire model is dialogue, consensus, economic integration, and keeping multiple outside powers engaged without letting any of them turn the region into a chessboard. Is it perfect? Probably not, but its record matters. ASEAN-China dialogue began in 1991. China became a full dialogue partner in 1996, and the relationship now includes trade, investment, maritime discussions, infrastructure, digital cooperation, and the upgraded ASEAN-China Free Trade Area. That's not a failure. That is 11 countries refusing to outsource their foreign policy to cable news panic merchants. You see, this Indian reporter wants a counterweight. Anwar wants peace. One of those approaches has kept Southeast Asia from turning into Ukraine. Spoiler, it's not the think tank buzzword. And quick question for the reporter. Did he bring this same tough guy energy to Modi when Trump bitch-slapped India with punitive tariffs? Remember February this year? The US cut its tariff on Indian goods from 25% to 18% and removed an additional 25% tariff after the White House said India committed to stop buying Russian oil, cut barriers to US products, and buy more than $500 billion of American goods. That's Washington using market access as a crowbar. But apparently, it only counts as weakness when ASEAN works with China instead of doing what Trump demands.
Okay, let me ask you in the context of Chinese aggression of David Goliath about Taiwan. Much of the world recognizes Taiwan as part of China, so do you. But you're seen as someone who stands up for democracy, for people's aspirations. Does the will of the Taiwanese people not count? Because poll after poll shows they overwhelmingly do not want to be ruled by Beijing.
That's antecedent of history. If you accept Taiwan to be part of China,
Yes.
you can express your views for or against, but it is a part of China, and the Chinese have to decide. Why this hypocrisy and contradiction? I see Taiwan as part of China, period. We may disagree, there are some excesses, yes, express your view. But it must be in that context, it is one China, it's accepted by all.
You don't see the complexity there with Taiwan. You're someone who's very much a committed Democrat.
Yes.
When you see a population there, a small island of people who do not want, largely at least, to be governed by an authoritarian state, they prefer their democratic setup. Don't you feel somewhere, officially you might say that they're part of China, but don't you feel, as a leader, as a Democrat, some empathy for that sentiment?
No, of course.
And
I do express empathy in many other issues, since you're not asking it. I mean, so many other areas, empathy, the issues, religious issues, regional issues, tribal issues, in all these countries, even in Malaysia. Do you have views, conscience? Yeah, of course. But what you're suggesting is a way, a complicity or even condoning an attempt to break up a legitimate independent country. And I don't accept that. The only reason why these things crop up is because of antecedent history of a colonial past. And I am not in any way condoning colonialism.
Here comes the empathy exam. Now, this guy wants Anwar to override Malaysia's own foreign policy because it would make a satisfying soundbite. Malaysia's position is not ambiguous. Its 2025 joint statement with China recognizes the PRC as the sole legal government of China, describes Taiwan as an inalienable territory of the PRC, and says Malaysia will not support Taiwanese independence. Anwar isn't dodging complexity. He is stating his country's actual policy, and the history is not some footnote. The US sent the 7th Fleet into the Taiwan Strait in 1950 after the Korean War began, an intervention the US State Department says delayed the conflict in the strait. So when Anwar says the American angle matters, he is not changing the subject. He is naming the gigantic naval fleet already sitting in the subject. UN Resolution 2758 settled China's UN representation in favor of the PRC. It doesn't itself rule on Taiwan's sovereignty, and anybody pretending it does is handing critics an easy win. But Malaysia's one China policy is clear. This interviewer can't make that policy disappear just by repeating, "but democracy," with increasingly concerned eyebrows.
No, it's not just a colonial framework, is it, Prime Minister? Because the Chinese themselves talk of reunification. If they are indeed one entity, then you wouldn't need to reunify. But if, as the Chinese have said...
Because the Seventh Fleet, my dear.
Okay.
That's why they talk about reunification.
Okay, you're bringing in the American angle. But China has said that if peaceful reunification doesn't work, they reserve the right to use force. If it comes to that, would you condemn that?
I always take it as a Malaysian example. If one province decide to break away, do we use force? I think I will protect the sanctity and unity of the nation.
So you would use force?
Yes. Because otherwise, to be fragmented, what are you suggesting? I mean, to me...
I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just asking questions, which is my job as a journalist.
Nobody should want war over Taiwan, full stop. The question is, why is this guy's moral outrage arriving with a GPS lock on Beijing and then mysteriously loses signal everywhere else? Human Rights Watch says India's BJP-led government in 2025 vilified religious minorities, targeted Bengali-speaking Muslims and Rohingya refugees, and continued unlawful demolitions of Muslim homes and properties. Where is the same relentless empathy interview for them? And when the UN General Assembly voted in June 2025 on a resolution calling for the immediate, unconditional, permanent Gaza ceasefire, India abstained. Again, that is India's government decision, not a reflection on ordinary Indian people, but it makes the selective moral sermon a little harder to swallow. If people's aspirations are the sacred standard, apply it everywhere then. Palestine, Kashmir, India's Muslims, every place. Otherwise, this isn't journalism. It's a geopolitical playlist with China permanently on repeat.
Yeah.
There are, as you know, there have been movements for independence.
But to me, when it comes to China, it's always this, I should say, not ambivalence. Ambivalence is a light word.
Okay.
But it's hypocrisy. Because you don't talk about, many countries in Europe breaking up, or within the United States, or within Africa, or even within other regions. But
all
you
of that
focus only on China.
Okay, let me come back to the original question about middle powers acting as a check against big powers. Is there a lesson from the Iran war on how a smaller power, this is a country that has been sanctioned for decades?
You know, that's the whole interview in one sentence. When it comes to China, every disputed line on a map becomes a moral emergency. When it comes to everybody else, suddenly, people like this guy discover a complexity. Anwar is not saying China gets a free pass. He's saying correctly that the region has to be allowed to manage disputes without every Western-aligned outlet trying to manufacture a Chinese monster in the background. ASEAN and China have disputes. They also have negotiation mechanisms, the world's biggest regional trade relationship, and a shared interest in keeping the peace. That is called statecraft. Now, this Indian interviewer came looking for a China threat quote. Anwar gave him a lesson in sovereignty instead, and the poor guy spent the rest of the interview trying to reboot the same question. The people trying hardest to turn that relationship into a permanent crisis are usually nowhere near the South China Sea. The global South is not a collection of extras waiting for Washington, Delhi, or London to tell it what to fear. Countries like Malaysia are making their own calculations, and China's offer of trade, infrastructure, and negotiation clearly matters more than the endless panic porn. What do you think? Is ASEAN being soft? Or is it simply too smart to join another Cold War? Drop your take below. If you got any value from this video, subscribe, like, and share this with somebody still confusing diplomacy with weakness. As usual guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.